possible that some departments may utilize travel more than others. Now, if there was some sort of a criteria established, one option for creating more money that perhaps could be dispersed more generally would be after a certain amount of travel time has been utilized, if there's any money left over from a department, then that money from travel should be perhaps used and dispersed in other ways, not necessarily even in the department which saved in travel expenses, but just generally applied to the budget. That's one suggestion that I have, because it appears to me that possibly there is too much variation from department to department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bob Simpson. Hey, just a comment. I think, John, you're onto something. I just quickly did the math in my head, and at 58.5 cents a mile, if you've got any employee driving greater than 100 miles, you might as well go rent a car, because at $35 an automobile plus tax plus 4 gallons of fuel, you're there. So that's pretty simple. And if you want to get out and lease a vehicle, if you think you can keep them busy that long, that is a savings. Interestingly enough, we once did that at a prior company I worked for. We came up against this all the time. The second thing that everybody always kind of gets entrenched in looking at just ways to cut cost, and sometimes you got to look towards the revenue side, maybe a little bit more creatively. And one of the things that I keep coming back to is that the longer it takes to put policy in place, the longer it takes to generate revenue. And a perfect example again is the planning department. You have to say we know that we're running in the planning department with fewer people than needed, and therefore it takes much longer period of time to get a building permit, as an example. And we all know the faster you improve a piece of property, the greater the tax base becomes for the county. And I would really encourage you to look rapidly at what you can do to perhaps fast track, whether that's contracting out with other engineering firms to help their staff along. But I think the revenue side has got to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public wishing to speak on the budget considerations? Okay, seeing no one step forward, I'll bring it back to the board for action. I do believe the required motion is to provide direction on proposed actions. So what's the board want to do at this point? Supervisor Pinches.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. In light of the fact that most of the real meat of the any budget cuts is going to be meat confer items, but I'd like to make this motion to strongly encourage the voluntary time off, to reduce travel with a goal of a 20% overall reduction, of course, eliminate the bottled water, continue the hiring freeze, and also direct the part of the motion would be to direct the CEO's office to come back with a plan within 30 days to address this. Maybe it takes a new county policy or something to reflect where we can get some savings out of the reflection of gas prices dropping 50% on our travel, whether it's Mr. Simpson's idea of going to rental cars or whatever. But to wait for the federal government to come up with their new guidelines, I think we can act quicker than that. We're local government. We have the ability to make quick action. So that would be my motion.
Okay.
Basically, those 5 bullet points.
Those 5 bullet points. Okay. There is a motion before us for the 5 bullet points as stated. Is there a second to the motion? Recommended motion for the 5 bullet points has been moved. Is there a second to the motion? Okay, motion fails for lack of a second. Supervisor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think as Mr. McCowan stated, that we really are sort of nibbling around the edges, and that's probably an apt sort of analogy or comment. I wanted to comment on Mr. Simpson's comments, because I think He's absolutely correct. We really need to look at the revenue side, and I think we've got one section in here, Section 4, that attempts to do that. But I'm really hoping that, and this isn't really going at this juncture to a motion, but I'm really hoping that the CEO will be paying serious attention to this. I am somewhat surprised, given the amount of time that's transpired and the economic downfall that has only been exacerbated since we passed our budget in, I believe it was late August and then adopted formally in September, that we've had a number of months in which to look at the revenue side. And I would hope that this is done with due diligence immediately. I believe one thing we need to look at very, very clearly, and I hope we begin to do this in January, is the solid waste franchise fees. We touched on this during discussions around the budget period, although they weren't directly during the budget. And I believe that the rough calculations that I recall with our solid waste director is that if we just made our fees parallel with those that are charged by the incorporated jurisdictions within the county, we would see an increase of approximately $300,000, somewhere in that range. That just brings us up with what the cities are charging. In fact, it wouldn't even take us as far as I believe the city of Ukiah goes. So, there's a $300,000 input on the revenue side. We absolutely have got to look at the elimination of programs, concepts, things that we may all want, but we may have to forego. I think we've got to look at this delaying of the implementation of the COLAs again. These go to meet and confer. And I concur with Ms. McClure. We really do need to look to the county employees to see if they are, able to bring forward some cost savings components that may not be significant in terms of the overall dollars, but they're probably going to address the minor ones that Supervisor Pinch has elaborated, things like the reduction of travel, the bottled water. Those small items will eventually all add up. But those are the small ones, and perhaps county employees could even come up with things that would create some cost savings that are more significant than that. But I really think that the revenue side needs to be looked at. I would like this board to consider creating a finance committee in January that looks and delves into all aspects of fees, getting input in open